The safety recall detailed in this program involves 1991 and 1992 model year Dodge Ram pickup trucks equipped with a 5.9-liter intercooled turbo diesel engine and an injection pump date-coded 163 through 169. The recall also applies to 1991, 1992, and 1993 Ram pickup trucks with a warranty service replacement injection pump that was installed through May 11, 1993. On these vehicles, the internal fuel injection pump fulcrum lever pin may break, causing a loss of throttle control. To correct this condition, the fuel injection pump must be replaced if the vehicle is equipped with one of the affected original equipment or warranty replacement injection pumps. For repair of affected vehicles, there are two parts packages involved in this recall. One for vehicles with a manual transmission and one for vehicles with an automatic transmission. To determine if the recall service is required, the fuel injection pump data plate on all involved vehicles must first be inspected. To do this, locate the data plate on the lower outboard side of the pump body and inspect the data plate for the presence of an infinity symbol as shown here. The presence of this infinity symbol indicates that the pump has already been serviced and no further action is required. If an infinity symbol is not present, inspect the date code highlighted here to determine if it is 163 through 169. All pumps with no infinity symbol that have a date code of 163 through 169 must be replaced. As mentioned earlier, some vehicles may be equipped with a warranty replacement pump. These pumps will carry a Mopar remanufactured data tag. Again, if an infinity symbol is present on the Mopar data tag, no further action is required. However, if the infinity symbol is not on the Mopar data tag, you must inspect the date codes on the pump data plate by removing one of the rivets on the Mopar tag and rotating the tag to expose the pump data plate. If the date codes on the data plate are any number from 163 through 169, the fuel injection pump must be replaced. If the date code is not 163 through 169, no further action is required. In this case, place a daub of RTV sealer behind the Mopar data tag and reposition the tag over the data plates. Before replacing the fuel injection pump, you should be aware that the fuel pressure on these vehicles could be as high as 59,000 kPa or 8,000 psi, which could cause serious bodily harm. Therefore, it is important that you wear safety goggles and adequate protective clothing, and you do not allow any contact with fuel spray when bleeding any high-pressure lines. Also, it is critical to follow the service procedures exactly as they are detailed to avoid personal injury or damage to the vehicle. Also, a number of special tools will be required to properly perform this service procedure. In order of use, these tools include an injector fuel line crowfoot such as MAC number CHBM17, Matco number WCFS17M, or Snap-on number FRHM17. An injector fuel line socket such as MAC number COBR17, Matco WCFM1517, or Snap-on number FRXM17. An injection pump drive gear T-bar puller such as Cummins number ST647, Miller number L4407A, or Snap-on number CG606BB. A 13mm offset wrench for the lower inboard pump mounting nut such as Cummins number 3377198 or Snap-on number SP144. A barring tool such as Cummins number 3377371, Miller number 7471A, or Snap-on number SP371, and an optical tachometer such as Cummins number 3377462 or snap-on number MT139. The first part of this program will detail the procedure for removing the fuel injection pump. With the ignition key in the off position, disconnect the negative battery cable. To ensure customer satisfaction, remember to record all radio settings before disconnecting the battery and to reset the radio after completing the service. Next, disconnect the throttle linkage at the pump lever ball stud. Now remove the throttle return springs and remove the throttle linkage bracket and set it aside for working access. When performing this step, do not remove the pump control lever from the pump because it is indexed to the shaft during pump calibration. Now, remove the air-fuel control tube. When removing this tube or any other fuel tube during this procedure, be careful not to bend any of the tubes. Next, remove the low-pressure supply line that runs from the separator filter to the front of the pump. Now, disconnect the fuel drain manifold line at the rear of the pump. Next, remove the hold-down clamp bolt that retains the line. The clamp is located behind the pump high-pressure lines. Now, disconnect the two wires to the fuel shutoff valve. Disconnect the wire to the KSB solenoid. And for vehicles with an automatic transmission, disconnect the throttle position sensor electrical connector. Next, disconnect the 6 high-pressure lines at the rear of the pump using an injector fuel line crowfoot tool or injector socket. Be sure to note each fuel line to pump outlet location to assure that the lines are properly installed to the new pump. Now remove the oil dipstick and the top engine cover. Next, remove the 4 bracket bolts at the top of the manifold holding the front and rear fuel bundles. Then disconnect the fuel tubes from injectors using the injector fuel line socket. After disconnecting the fuel tubes at the injectors, remove the fuel bundle assembly for injectors 1, 2, and 3. Next, swing the rear fuel bundle down to gain additional clearance at the rear of the pump. Now remove the top 2 bolts and the bottom bolt from the pump support bracket. Then loosen the remaining bolt and swing the bracket rearward. The bottom bolt and pivot bolt are hidden below and behind the power steering pump. Now, remove the oil filler bracket bolt and unscrew the filler tube from its base. For visual access, the upper radiator hose has been removed. After removing the filler tube, unscrew the filler tube base from the pump gear housing cover. Next, place a towel under the pump drive gear retaining nut to keep it from falling into the gear housing, and remove the pump drive gear retaining nut and washer. Now use 8mm by 1 1/4mm screws to attach a T-bar puller to the drive gear, and pull the fuel injection pump drive gear off the pump drive shaft. Then remove the T-bar puller. Next, remove the 3 pump-to-housing mounting nuts. When removing the lower inboard nut, use the special offset 13mm wrench listed earlier with the other special tools. After removing the mounting nuts, remove the pump from the mounting studs, being very careful so that the drive key does not drop into the gear housing. With both the new and old pump on the bench, remove the special washer wired to the throttle lever of the new pump and set it aside for later use. Next, transfer the throttle lever linkage ball stud from the old pump to the new replacement injection pump. For vehicles equipped with automatic transmissions only, you must also remove the throttle position sensor and bracket assembly from the pump top cover by removing the 3 attaching Allen screws. Next, remove the throttle position sensor from the bracket assembly and save the TPS adapter, screws, and bracket for installation to the new injection pump. Now, transfer the 3 top cover screws from the new injection pump to the old pump. These screws are too short to properly install the TPS bracket. Now, install the TPS bracket onto the new pump using the 3 Allen mounting screws from the old pump. Insert the hex on the bottom of the TPS adapter into the hex in the replacement pump throttle lever, making sure to engage the adapter tang into the notched area of the bracket. Next, install the new throttle position sensor, which can be identified by the new bottom surface design as seen here. Then install the new throttle position sensor from the parts package onto the bracket, making sure to insert the slotted end of the TPS adapter into the notched area of the throttle position sensor. The TPS adapter must engage the throttle lever hex and the TPS notch with the throttle position sensor and throttle levers spring-loaded to the low idle position. The throttle position sensor will be adjusted after the new injection pump has been installed. The next part of this program will demonstrate the proper procedures for installing the new fuel injection pump. To begin, spray the top dead center lock pin with Mopar MP50, part number 4549626. To assure proper operation, push the pin in and pull it out several times until it moves freely. Next, remove the plastic plug at the lower right of the transmission adapter housing and install the barring tool. Set the engine to top dead center by using the barring tool to rotate the engine in a clockwise direction as viewed when facing the front of the engine. For the engine to rotate in a clockwise direction, the barring tool must be turned in a counterclockwise direction. To set the top dead center position of the compression stroke, slowly rotate the engine with the barring tool while watching the keyway of the pump drive gear. As the keyway approaches the 6 o'clock position, push in on the TDC lock pin. When the lock pin engages the hole in the cam gear with the drive gear keyway at about the 5:30 position, the engine will be at top dead center of the compression stroke. If the pump drive gear keyway passes the 4:30 position and the lock pin does not engage the cam gear, release pressure on the pin and rotate the engine counterclockwise until the keyway is in the 7 o'clock position, and repeat the original procedure until the pin engages, with the keyway at about the 5:30 position. Do not engage the lock pin into the cam gear while rotating the engine in the counterclockwise direction. Pump to engine timing will be adversely affected. Also, do not use a starter motor for this procedure. Use only a barring tool to slowly rotate the engine. To avoid breaking the lock pin, stop rotating the engine immediately when the lock pin snaps into the cam gear hole. After setting engine top dead center, remove the barring tool and reinstall the plastic plug into the access hole. Next, pull the TDC lock pin out of the cam gear hole. Do not move the engine once the number 1 top dead center compression stroke position is set. Now, remove the old injection pump mounting gasket. Clean the sealing surface and install the new provided gasket. To prevent slippage, make sure the injection pump drive shaft and drive gear are clean and free of all oil before installation. You will also note that the shaft of the replacement pump is locked so that the key aligns with the drive gear keyway when cylinder 1 is at top dead center. Now, making sure the pump shaft key engages the drive gear keyway slot, install the new injection pump onto the mounting studs, being careful so that the shaft key does not fall into the gear housing. Install the pump mounting nuts on the studs and finger tighten the nuts, making sure the pump is free to rotate in the slots. Now, install the pump drive gear spring washer and nut and torque the nut to 18 foot-pounds or 24 Newton meters. The pump may rotate slightly when tightening the pump drive nut because of the gear lash between the pump drive gear and cam gear. This movement is acceptable as long as the entire pump moves within the mounting stud slots and there is no pump shaft-to-pump housing movement. Be careful not to over-tighten the pump drive gear nut. As mentioned, the replacement pump shaft is locked in position to eliminate the need to set pump-to-engine timing. Also, this is not the final torque for the drive gear. To take up any gear lash, gently rotate the injection pump against the direction of the drive rotation, approximately 1 millimeter toward the intake manifold. When performing this step, do not apply heavy rotational force on the pump after gear lash is removed, as this may preload the pump and affect pump-to-engine timing. After taking up the gear lash, evenly tighten the pump mounting stud nuts to 108 inch-pounds or 12 Newton meters. After this preliminary step, tighten the nuts to a final torque of 18 foot-pounds or 24 Newton meters. Now, use a chisel or similar tool to permanently mark the injection pump mounting flange to match the existing mark on the gear housing. Next, unlock the fuel injection pump shaft by loosening the lock screw and insert the special washer under the lock screw. Torque the lock screw to 10 foot-pounds or 13 Newton meters. Next, tighten the pump drive gear retaining nut to a final torque of 48 foot-pounds or 65 Newton meters. At this point, the towel that was previously used to cover the drive gear area can be removed. Next, reinstall the oil filler base and oil tube that were previously removed from the gear housing cover. Now, install the fuel drain manifold banjo fitting to the pump using the new bolt and sealing washers provided with the replacement pump. Do not reuse the old bolt or sealing washers. The new banjo bolt provided with the pump has a calibrated bleed which is matched to the replacement pump. Next, reinstall and tighten the fuel drain manifold line hold-down clamp bolt. Now, reinstall the fuel supply line to the pump and securely tighten the fitting. Install the other end of the supply line to the separator filter using the new provided sealing washers. Leave this banjo bolt finger tight until after the fuel system has been purged of air. Next, thoroughly clean all the high-pressure fuel line fittings and connections to make sure no contamination or debris can enter the system. Now be careful to install each high-pressure fuel line on the same pump outlet port position from which they were removed. When installing the lines to the pump, prevent the injection pump delivery valve holders from turning. Then tighten the lines to 22 foot-pounds or 30 Newton meters. Next, install the high-pressure fuel lines to each injector, but do not tighten the lines at the injectors until the fuel system has been purged of air. To prevent the possibility of an air intake leak, coat the 4 bolts used to secure the fuel line support brackets with Mopar silicone sealant RTV, part number 4318025. Then install and torque the bolts to 18 foot-pounds or 24 Newton meters. Next, reinstall the air-fuel control tube. Now, reinstall the oil dipstick and top engine cover. Now, swing the pump support bracket into position and torque the 4 bolts to 18 foot-pounds or 24 Newton meters. Now, connect the 2 wires to the fuel shutoff valve. By the way, these wires are interchangeable. Connect the wire to the KSB solenoid. And for vehicles with an automatic transmission, connect the throttle position sensor electrical connector. Next, install the throttle bracket and torque the attaching bolt and 2 nuts to 18 foot-pounds or 24 Newton meters. Then install the throttle linkage onto the pump lever ball stud and reinstall the throttle return springs. Next, inspect the closed throttle and wide open throttle accelerator linkage travel stops. To do this, first verify that the pump throttle lever contacts the low idle speed screw in the closed throttle position. For visual access, the TPS electrical connector has been disconnected. Then, with the aid of an assistant, depress the accelerator pedal to the wide-open throttle position and verify that the spring-loaded breakover lever has moved off the stop and is against the breakover spring as seen here. If the pump stops are not adjusted as just demonstrated, adjust the linkage using the diesel engine throttle linkage adjustment procedure detailed in the service manual. Next, loosen the low-pressure supply line banjo bolt bleed screw at the separator filter and prime the system by operating the hand lever on the lift pump until the fuel flowing from the fitting is free of air. Then torque the separator filter banjo bolt to 24 foot-pounds or 32 Newton meters and the bleed screw to 72 inch-pounds or 8 Newton meters. Next, loosen all 6 fuel tube connections at the injectors and operate the hand lever of the lift pump until fuel is observed coming out of one of the high-pressure fuel lines at the injectors, or until the lift pump lever has been pumped a minimum of 30 seconds, whichever occurs first. After achieving fuel supply at the injectors, reconnect the battery. Before performing the next steps in the procedure, be aware that the 59,000 kPa or 8,000 psi of fuel pressure in the lines is sufficient to penetrate the skin and cause serious bodily harm. Also, for your personal protection, it is critical to wear safety goggles, protective clothing, and to not come in contact with the fuel spray when bleeding high-pressure lines. Also, when performing these steps, do not bleed air from the fuel system of a hot engine, and do not allow fuel to spray on the exhaust manifold. With these safety points in mind, you can begin to bleed the high-pressure fuel lines. With the fuel tube connections still loose at all injectors, place the transmission in neutral or park, set the parking brake, and crank the engine to allow entrapped air to bleed from the fuel lines. Then, tighten all the injector fuel line connections. Next, start the engine and purge air from each injector fuel tube connection one line at a time until the engine runs smoothly. Then tighten all the injector fuel line connections to 18 foot-pounds or 24 Newton meters using a special injector fuel line socket. After completing the bleeding procedure, connect an optical tachometer to the engine and prepare the vehicle for an idle check. To do this, ensure the parking brake is applied and make sure the throttle lever is against the low idle speed stop screw. If equipped, turn on the air conditioning and bring the engine to full operating temperature. If the vehicle is equipped with an automatic transmission, place the transmission in the drive position and ensure that the parking brake holds the vehicle at rest. Now, check and adjust the engine low idle speed to 750 RPMs plus or minus 50 RPMs, by using the low idle speed stop screw. The final portion of this program applies only to vehicles equipped with an automatic transmission and describes the proper procedures for adjusting the throttle position sensor. To begin, the injection pump throttle lever must be in the low idle position, and the throttle lever must reach breakover when the throttle is wide open. Next, turn the ignition key to the on position. Now, connect the negative lead of a voltmeter to a good ground and connect the positive lead to the center output wire of the throttle position sensor electrical connector. The connector must remain attached to the TPS. With the throttle lever contacting the low idle screw, the TPS output voltage should be 1 volt, plus or minus 0.05 of a volt. If required, adjust the closed throttle TPS setting by gently rotating the nylon adapter until the correct voltage reading is obtained. Next, open the throttle lever to the wide open position and check the voltmeter to ensure that the TPS output voltage increases a minimum of 2¼ volts from the closed throttle position. After completing this service procedure, the removed fuel injection pump must be turned into the warranty material return center. To do this, make sure the pump is drained for approximately 10 minutes and plug the orifices. Use the replacement pump packaging and orifice plugs for return shipment. Dealers are urged to perform this service on all involved vehicles promptly and courteously on request by involved owners. For further information regarding this service procedure, replacement parts, parts return, and claim reporting, refer to the Dealer Safety Recall Notification Letter number 605.